Okay, now we're recording. So this is my process of how to do that. And I'm going to use the GW HPC resources. So it's a little different. This also, the basic process works on Colab as well. And Colab will give you GPU access, but it's kind of like they turn it on and off. Like if they have a lot of demand for paying clients, they turn your GPU off and move you to CPU. And then they put you back to GPU when they have extra resources. Yeah, I know. I'm going to move over to it. So the first thing that I wanted to mention, and I guess you can't see this, is that if you're going to connect to GPU and the HPC resources, you do have to connect through the GW VPN. Otherwise, nothing will happen. I've sat there many times wondering, like, why is nothing happening? And then remember, oh, yeah, I have to connect through the VPN. Once you're connected through the VPN, then you can go to HPC on demand, which you don't have. This is like once I've signed in. If you just do OOD or openondemand.arc.gwu.edu, you'll end up here. Once you get through all the login screens, it uses SSO, and then you have to do this and that, but you get there. When you get here, then you can turn on a server that you'll be using. So currently I have one node running. I have one GPU core running. This is GPU number 12. This is part of the large cluster. I guess I'll just go ahead and do it. It will take a minute to turn it back on. So I'll delete my one that I am running, sign back in. And then I'll go to apps. So this is what it looks like when you get there. If you're not signed in, I'm going to select the large GPU cluster. There's a small GPU cluster. There's a debug GPU. And you can select the large cluster. It just is a bigger cluster of them. You still just get one node. So it's not like you're getting more. But they have on a website what types of chips are on each of them, so you can look and see. But the large and the small pretty much run the same. I'll just.
So on top we get 4 nodes, on medium we get 2, and on the small we get 1 of them. So
yeah, you can get up to, I guess, more nodes, but yeah, typically I just get 1.
On large?
On large, I can request more, is my understanding.
No, you get 1 node, but on that node there are 4 GPUs.
Oh, there are 4 GPUs. Okay, then go with large because you're going to get 4. And you can select the number of hours up to 7 days. If you select 7 days, though, you might end up in queue longer. So I'm just going to select like 5 hours. And I'll just reconnect later if I want to do something longer. And that should move me through the queue more quickly. And so now I'm in the queue to get my node so that I can run what I'm going to do. So I could have left it turned on and then I wouldn't have to wait for this. But then what it'll do is it'll open up a virtual machine so that I can run all my stuff on that virtual machine on that node. I was hoping by going with 5 hours, this would happen more quickly, because there isn't much to see until I get it back on. Oh, I still have it running, it says. Let's see what happens if I click it. Oh, yep, it's still running, so we can move on. Okay, so this is now running on that GPU machine. So this is no longer on my machine, this is on their machine, and I'm using a virtual Windows to see that, which is really great, and it can do lots of things. So a couple of things to note about your access when you're on the HPC services. If you go up to the top of the window, you'll see I have like an R Wakians, and then I have a file system. And they have some that are listed. So if I click here, I have a group within there, then within my school, the education school, I have a group and I can store stuff there as well. And then I also have my own files up here, which has my home directory within that as well. In my understanding, and I could be a little off about this, is you shouldn't do your work in the home directory. It is a slower memory state. It's like for storing long-term things. And where you should actually do your work is down here in Scratch. And Scratch has faster memory services, so things will run much faster for you. But they don't stay there permanently. They do send emails out saying like, we're gonna delete everything in Scratch every so many months. Move it all to your long-term. Then you move it over, and then when they've deleted it. They did it last summer when they moved from one called Lustry or something to Scratch. But it does work faster when you're in Scratch. I have noticed some difference. So I created a folder and then a subfolder for the demo. And I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll just create another folder and we'll try to do some of this live as we go. So I'll create coders demo. I'll call this my third version. As I said, not everything always runs well, so I keep recreating it. And I'll take from my second one, the primary files, which will be this one, and looking for, oh, maybe that's it for now. Too fast. Okay, so I'm gonna take my fine-tuning one, I'll put it in there. My passwords file, put it in there. And then that. And then in here, I also have VS Code. And I'll go ahead and open a new window of VS Code. And then I'll open up that files that I just put into there. So I'll go down to Scratch. Okay. Are these not in name order? Got Scratch. And then Marquin's Group Coders version 3. And then I'll open up this. So this is going to do a variety of things. But is this the file I want to show first? No. Let me go back to open.
You have visual code like on them.
Yeah, I'm using visual code on their server, not on my computer. Which just makes it easier. Yeah, I guess that is the file I do want. Just trying to make. So this is going to do a variety of things, and it's going to use some tools. So it's going to use something called Unsloth. I have no idea why they name it Unsloth, but it helps create new models. So I'm going to use Olama as the primary tool for interacting with models. But in order to fine-tune a model, I have to have other software, other packages that will help me build that so that I can interact with it later. So in the end, the idea is I'll be able to go into Olama and I'll be able to run either like a Llama 3 model or my customized version of a Llama 3 model and be able to interact with it and see what the differences are between how those models interact. So we'll use Unsloth in this part of it in order to take the new data that I am going to create and then actually turn that into the model itself. So in order to do that, though, I have to have data to turn into that model. And so when I was trying to think of how to demo this, I was thinking about, well, what type of data would be interesting to look at and would create a chat bot that is of interest. And I said, oh, well, maybe we'll make it a psychologist. And so then I thought, well, how am I going to get data about how does a psychologist answer questions so my chatbot can sound like a psychologist? And that's when I decided to go to Reddit and actually, there's a Reddit Ask Psychology subreddit, and just has thousands of questions, and then the psychologists answer them. And I was like, perfect, I'll just have to scrape that, turn that into a data set, then train my model on that data set, and then do all that, and bam, I'll have a chatbot that sounds like a psychologist. Now, I could have chosen any Reddit forum. I've done this for other ones too, and they all work about the same. Because it's a fairly good format for the data. In terms of, it will just take the data and it has all the answers and stuff. You just have to reformat it, basically. And so I'll show you the script that I use to do that. Let me open that up. Open file, Reddit dataset maker, creative naming. So Reddit has an API, they call it PRAW for some reason. I'm also gonna do LangChain. So I'm gonna do a variety of things. I'm gonna sign in, so I have to have a password file, and I have that in a separate file. So I don't make that mistake again of showing everyone my password in a recorded video. And then I'm gonna go to Reddit, and I'm gonna get the comments. And I'm gonna get, for this, I'm just gonna get 200 off of it. For actually training, I took more like 1,500. But it'll just go faster for this demonstration if I just do 200. And I'm gonna create a file, and it's gonna be a JSON file afterwards. And it's gonna do each of the top questions and then the top 5 answers. And then I'm going to use a llama model to take the top 5 answers, consolidate it down to one answer, the best answer. So for each question, I get one answer instead of 5, because some of the quality of the answers are pretty bad. So I figured I don't really want to train on bad, but if I give it 5 and I tell llama to consolidate that down to the best, then it does a pretty good job of that. Yes.
Is there a link to the number of comments that you can describe?
So with Reddit, you can do 100 every, and then you have to take like a 60-second break and then do another 100. Like you can't do it in one continuous run or it boots you out. So you'll see at the bottom of my code, I have a 60-second pause built into it. So it'll run and then it will pause for 60 seconds and then it will run again and get me another 100, pause, and then get me another 100. Yep.
Follow-up question.
Yeah, no problem.
I mean, how does it work based on IP or session? I mean, if we use, for example, Pegasus and run 100 jobs at a time, does it understand that? Okay.
I wasn't trying to game their system. I don't want to get blacklisted by them. And it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, a pause, I'm only doing 1,500. So I go make a sandwich, come back, and it's done, all its things. Now, if I wanted to grab like 100,000 and I wanted to do it often. Now, my guess is Reddit programmers are pretty good and they'll catch you pretty fast if you're trying to get around their guardrails. And then they'll blacklist you and then you'll have other problems.
Yeah, bigger problems.
Yeah, I mean, they're not like unqualified programmers at Reddit. They know what they're doing. And this works well enough for this type of a task. So it logs into their client system. And then I tell it what subreddit I want it to go to. And you'll see down here, I say I want it to go to the Ask Psychology one. Of course, I didn't write all of this code. I borrowed it from other places. This is something that ChatGPT wasn't actually too helpful with because there's not a lot of documentation for a small API. It's not the big popular API, though it's really a useful one. So I'm just going to have it get 200 questions, and then it will take a pause. And then what I'm going to have it do, so there is something called Ask Psychology Weekly, which is a weekly synopsis. I wanted to skip those, so I tell it to skip those because it was just messing up my data set. And then I have it get the top 5 comments based on the number of scores. Like they have a scoring system that you can rank them on. So it grabs just the top 5 of those. And then here you'll see this is where the pause comes in. I time sleep for 60 seconds and then it does it again. And then it outputs that as a JSON file. And then I have it go into do summaries after. And if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm happy to share this code at some point, and I'll explain. I can share it at any point, but I'm not going to put it on Git quite yet because there are some issues with dependencies that conflict later on that will hopefully get fixed by people much smarter than myself who run some of these packages. But once those get done, then I'm going to post it to Git. But for now, it'd be more confusing than good for people. So yeah, the first function then is just to get the subreddit, get the questions, get the top 5 responses, put it into a JSON file, and that's it. But as I said, the top 5 responses can be a little all over the place, and not all of them are good. So then I decided to use an LLM to summarize those. And so now I have it go in and it finds the questions and the responses. And I tell it, like, the prompt for it is, you are an experienced psychologist with years of training. And then it goes on to say, your job is to summarize the 5 comments in the best way possible, like if you were talking to students. And it's going to use a Llama 3 8 billion parameter model, which I have running anyway, and when I get this moving. So it'll be running in the background and it'll use that, just the general Llama model. And then it will, again, do some formatting to the JSON file so that it's in a format that I can use, and then output that. And then at the very end, so I have it output into a JSON file. There are, depending on what model you're trying to fine tune, so like if you're trying to fine tune a Mistral model or a Llama model, they use different formats for the data that they work with. And there are a couple of common ones. One is called a ChatML format. But there's like 6 or 7, and they work better and worse, and people debate these things online. So I'm going to use the ChatML one and just at the very end convert it. And again, this is just code someone had on some Git page of how you convert from any of them from a JSON file into the right format, which they call ChatML. And that works really well with Llama models, they said. And it, from my experience, it does. And then it will just dump it out once again. So it kind of does 3 things in this one file. It gets the data, it summarizes it, and then it changes the format a little so it cooperates better. So if I want to run this, then I'll bring up my terminal. I do have to do a couple of things to get set up. So when you're on the HPC services, you don't necessarily, like when you go in, it is just a server. You have to tell it what things you want to be running on that server. And so, for example, I have to tell it to install Python so that I can use Python. So I write ML Python and tell it which model of Python or which package of Python I want. I also have to tell it that I'm going to use Ollama because it's just not naturally running there.
What's that now?
I have no idea what it stands for, but I can. So what they do is if I do like ML list, so these are the things that are currently running on my version. So I just added the Python, so it is there. If I do module load, if I do it, they have a list. If I do available AV, it will give me a list, but you have to scroll through pages and pages of what options you have available. And then I will want to start Ollama so that it can be running as well. And as of actually just this morning or yesterday, they put in a new version of Ollama. So now we have the newest one running as well. So it's 0.57. And then with Ollama running, now I have to kind of start up an instance of it. So I just do Ollama serve and the and sign. And now I have, I guess, a binding or something to Ollama. And now that I am in there and I have bind going, I'm also going to just go ahead and install my virtual environment for it. So that I don't have to do pip installs for all the different things that I'm doing. So I'll just install the virtual environment. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, I already had it running. And so I think that's going to cause an error. So I've run into this problem before and I know the solution to it. So I'm going to list all of the things that are running. And so you'll see that there's my Ollama running. And then what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and kill that version of Ollama. And so I'll do 0, 5, 3, 2, 3, 5. Okay, so I killed the one that is running. And now when I do it, yeah, now it's going to start up a new one and do its thing. And then I'll be able to, so now I'll have Python running, I'll have Ollama running. And the last thing I'll do then in this part of it is I'm going to go ahead and connect to my virtual environment that has all my packages installed. So if I go here, then so now I'm in my virtual environment, which just makes life easier. Yeah. So now what I'll do is I'll go into the folder so if I do ls, you'll see where I am, and we want to go into, oh, where am I anyway? So here, I'll go into the folder where we're working on this. So I'll go to a new directory, edit, paste, and I think we called it version 3. Yep. And there are the 3 files that I put into it. And so now I'm just going to run Python, Reddit, dataset maker.py. So now it's going to be doing its thing of going through and collecting all those Reddit posts and then summarizing and then outputting the file into that. What I can do as we wait for it to do its thing, I can go ahead and show you what that file looks like since I just did this the other day. So if I go to when I did this one, you'll see here. So this is then what it will end up looking like. So this is 1,500 of the Reddit post with the summaries. So it has a human and the question was posting and commenting guidelines. Oh, I guess that's not that interesting. What conditions would cause a person to pick up and move every time they had problems or got upset? And then it gives an answer. Here's something about Carl Jung in one of the questions. And it's all in the right format now for fine tuning. So let's go ahead, close that. Yeah, so you can see here, it just did 100 requests and now it's pausing for the 60 seconds. Then it will do another 100. And that's why I only asked it to do 200 for the demo, is these long pauses aren't really necessarily exciting. But yeah, now it's collecting the next 200 and then it will use the LLM to summarize and you'll kind of see it scroll through that. Just give it a couple more seconds and then it should do some things. Yes, we're in the pause or it's doing something and we just don't see it. But the next part goes pretty fast because Olama is running on the same machine. It's not like I have to do calls or anything. It just goes through, summarizes them, packages it, and moves it along. So once it starts doing, then I'll just show you. Yeah. So now it's loading the Llama model in Olama. And it's packaging it all up. Let's see if, so what we should have here at this point then, yeah, so there is the JSON file that it made with the 200 in it. And now it's summarizing those and then it will remake that file over again. Yep.
So the stepwise thing was that you scrap a comment, a question with the comments.
Yep.
Stored in a JSON file, and then you call the Llama itself to summarize this information into a chat format.
Yeah, to summarize the answers, because so like if you look at, let's do subreddit ask psychology. So this is the format of so people ask questions and then it gets responses and people vote them up and down as in any other Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, what it does is it just takes the top of these. Now, some of these aren't very good answers and some are. So that's why I do this summary piece. But there's a lot of these Ask Reddit ones where you can ask Reddit to do things like ask Reddit, what are conservative viewpoints? Ask Reddit, what would a physician say? And it's just, so you can choose any of them, but they're already in the ask answer format, which makes life convenient. Yeah, so what it's doing now, you see all these, like the green and blue, that's each time it's using Llama to write a summary. So we'll do 200 of those, and then we'll have our final data set. And then we can move to then the next one. And probably what I'll do is I'll just kind of talk through the basis of this code, and I won't actually run it today because this is the part where it starts getting longer. Well, this part runs fast, but then the next part takes longer. So we'll just let that kind of run in the background at the bottom and we'll talk about, so this is where this package called Unsloth comes in. And it does a variety of things. And it uses transformers, and it uses another package called llama.cpp, which I have no idea what it does, but it seems very integral, and it doesn't always work right. It's partially because they keep updating it, and then the unsloth people have to keep updating theirs. And so like the other day, it broke like 4 days ago. They have an issue now on their GitHub saying they know it's broken, they're working on it. But this other package updated and some of their dependencies broke because they changed their naming format. And fortunately, they're going to update it, but that's kind of why I don't want to post to Git now, is so I have to work around those things for the time being because of those challenges. So it uses PyTorch and transformers, and will do a variety of things. So what this is going to do is allow me to choose what model I want to fine tune. So I could fine tune a Mistral model. I could do the Llama 3 8 billion or 70 billion. I could do and you can go to their website and they have more. And these are ones then that Llama supports as well. Now, if you don't use Llama, if you use LangChain or something, you have different model options. So I chose to go with this 8 billion instruct one. I read up on a bunch of them, and that seemed like the one most useful for the task I have. If I had like a more computational related things, if I wanted to ask a bunch of math questions, there are other models that are better for that. So you kind of have to read about all the different ones to see like which model do you want to fine tune. So once you pick that, then you can see down here, then I tell it which model and which tokenizer I want it to use. This is where things often kind of get broken, it seems, is with the token. Each of the models use a different type of tokening. So you can't just say like every model breaks tokens the same way. Every model uses their own way to do it. So like a Llama model uses a different one. So at some point later, because of this current issue, we have to go ahead and convert a token. What this will output does not work with Llama, apparently. So I have to convert it into a Llama compliant tokenizer so that when it gets words, it does the right type of tokening for it. And I'm going to use load it in a 4-bit and quantize it so that it runs faster and smaller. You could do 8 or there aren't too many other settings that I looked into and thought much about trying to change. So most of these I just copied from other people. Like I don't know what a LoRA alpha is, but it's set at 16, so sounds good to me. So yeah, it's like a lot of these things. We have to just take other people's opinion. I guess if I was a computer scientist or a data scientist, maybe I'd go in and like, what does it do if you bias it? What happens if you write no bias? I don't even know. And there's probably documentation somewhere for it. Yeah, so this, when it tokenizes it, it has to tokenize the content that we just created. So here is where I tell it that I went with the ChatML format. As I said, there were other formats you could use, but ChatML seemed like the one that if I decided to use it with something other than Llama, I could use it there as well, potentially. Whereas like some of these others, there's like an alpaca. And again, this is just the way that they tokenize. And so that's how I have it formatted. And then it maps it. And again, I didn't change any of this. This is just what was there. And so then it will do a function, I guess, where it's going to make sure that everything's done in conversation style with the text. So here's then where I import my data set that we're making. I guess I have to change this to 200. Is that the right file name? Yeah, it has the wrong date, but it is the right file name. So that is then where we'll import the data and it will map it so that everything works right. And then it will get things set up for the training. And again, these are things like, could I change the number of epochs? Yes. But for some reason, someone said 2 was a good one. And that's what I'll just stick with for now. And it does, like, this is like 16-bit is the FP16. Again, I had no reason to change these things, so I just left them pretty much exactly the same. And then it will use PyTorch and it will do its things. And this is actually where it's going to do the LoRA process. So I don't understand all of LoRA, but my understanding of LoRA is that it wants to change the weights in the model, but you don't have to change all the weights in all of the model in order to get better results. So this is the process where it figures out what are the weights that you'll get the most bang for your buck in. Like, what are those areas where you want to change the weights that will give you the best results to mimic this new data set that you have without trying to build a whole new llama model from scratch. Now, I don't know what percent of it actually changes. My guess is it's like a very small percent because a llama model is really huge. And I'm only giving it 1,500 examples, so it's not able to do that much. So this is the process of figuring out, of the hundreds of thousands of things it could change, what are like the top 100 that it should change to get the best performance based on the data that I gave it. So if I give it 200, it will do an okay job. If I give it 1,500, it will do a better job. If I gave it 20,000, it would probably do an even better job. And it would probably change more of the llama model. It's kind of my generalist understanding of what all this does. And I'm sure you could mess with this and figure out other ways of having it do it. But this seems to work for me. So then what it's going to output then is all that weight information. So this is, it's not actually changing the llama model yet. It's not creating that new llama model, but it's going to output what all the weight should be for when we do train it. And then that will actually give us the data so that we can train it. So it will output all those new weights that we want to use. We must be getting close to 200 down there, but what I can also do, since that's taking a while, maybe what I'll do is I'll just bring, I don't want to bring the 200 in. So let me go up here. I'll just bring the 1,500 model in, or 1,500 data set in. And we'll just use it because it's still making the 200. So you can see it's in the process of making it. You can see all the other ones. I could create the original JSON. Now it's switching it to the chat ML JSON. Okay. Oh, it actually is done, so we can't use it. Okay, so it finished. Now I have that training set. So now what I want to do is I want to run my coders demo fine-tuning.py. And so now what this is going to do is it's going to use, again, unslock to take the training data set, the original llama model, and figure out which of the weights in the llama model should be changed and what those new values are so that the new llama model will mimic the type of data that we showed it using the smallest amount of changes possible to get that type of performance. Yeah, so this will run, it runs fairly fast, actually. I was surprised. Has a cute little icon of a sloth. And then it will output into another folder then. File error. Oh, that's right. Let's see. Let's make sure I have the right name. Oh, I called it 2021. I see. Okay, so now if I go back here. Sorry, I mistyped. Let's say. So it should be 21 there. We'll go back in time. Okay, try this again. Okay, it seems to be working fine this time. Yeah, so it's taking samples now and looking and seeing again, what are those parameters? I guess it found trainable parameters to be 41,000 or 41 million. Yeah, so I guess that's how many parameters it's going to change the weights of in order to improve the model, which sounds like a lot, but in comparison to how big a model is, it's probably not all that big. So this will take a couple minutes to run. It's like 3 or 4 minutes, not like hours. But I'll show you what we're gonna end up with. So I'll just go to the one when I was doing it yesterday. So you end up with, it installs this llama.cpp. And again, this is one of those areas where I said that it's breaking. It installs the newest llama CPP, but it doesn't actually work with the newest llama CPP. And I'll talk about that next week, kind of how I got it to work. Pretty much I just went and I go to Git and I get an older version of it and I run the older version and things work better than when I run the newer version. But it does that automatically as part of it. It downloads, uncompiles, and installs it. But most importantly, it creates this folder. And in this folder, this is the magic of fine-tuning. This is all the new weights, and this tells it, it has different configuration files and these safe tensor files. And I guess for this size, it produced 4. Sometimes it does more of them, but that's where all that model weight information is stored. And then that's what we're going to give next week, the Llama program. So it will take these weights and retrain the model so that it has these weights rather than the old weights for those 41 million weights that it said we should switch around. So this is what we've been trying to get to, is being able to get to the point to know what are those weights that should be switched and have a data set to say, now do that. And then what we'll do next week then is use Llama to create that model. And then we'll actually be able to run the models, and we'll run like the original Llama and the other one and see how it reacts differently to the same prompts when you have a fine-tuned model versus yeah, so I think it's pretty cool, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily easy, but it's not that hard. If it wasn't for like the little times when you get error messages and then you have to go to ChatGPT and be like, why did I get this error message? And it gives you some vague answer. And it actually doesn't do really well with this stuff, I find. It gives you a lot of wrong things. you're much better off still going to like Stack Overflow and where people are actually doing it. But between all of it, I was able to get it up and running. Yeah, and it's pretty nice to be able to have your own models. And it's much different than a RAG model. Like RAGing is really useful if you have like specific information you want to put into the context. This is more like changing the whole personality. It's like Llama was one thing, and now I want Llama to act as if it's a psychologist who's gone to get a PhD in psychology. And it just acts differently then, which is very different. You can't get RAG with that. RAG is like bring in specific pieces of information into it. So it's just different use cases. Like what we're doing with the AI mentors for instructors, RAG is perfect because we want them to have like syllabus information. We want to have information out of readings. You don't want a whole new personality of a chatbot to do that. But I think there's going to be lots of times when having a whole new personality so that it's not just like patchworked answers on top, but the model itself behaves differently, will be useful. And I've been trying to think of some now of that. Other than just like, I mean, the psychology one's kind of fun. My wife's a psychologist, so I was like, oh, now I'll be like having my wife on my chatbot. Oh, and I got some error message.
I was gonna ask that question about what's the biggest difference between this and RAG. Succinctly answered it. I was also thinking about like, are there guardrails on this? Like, can I give it lots of awful stuff?
Oh yeah, people do. They
like,
make really
here's
bad
everything
ones.
Trump has ever said on Twitter. Just garbage, and be like, here you go, act like that now, and now it's going to just give me random like words back when I ask it a question. Like, some of these things are not.
Yeah, I'm sure people build really. I mean, that one doesn't even seem that terrible compared to what I could imagine people are building. Like
I mean, yeah,
really.
so.
But yeah,
Yeah,
but it would be really interesting. Let's say, so I've been talking with colleagues in psychology a lot about like simulated participants for not necessarily for testing out new theories, but like if you're doing assessment design and you want to see how would people of different personalities answer assessment differently. You can't use RAG to get to that, but you could train 30 different llamas with data representative of like different personality types. And then you would have 30 people to test your instrument without actually ever having to have a human test it. Now, you would still want to validate against human data, but if you were just looking for like internal consistency values and stuff, you could probably do a lot of that. And there are some data sets, like people have built like 1,000 participants with different personality characteristics that you can download into different models. So people are thinking kind of in this way of, yeah, you could have a Trump model if you wanted to test things to see how you think Trump would react. And then he posts so much online, it would probably be fairly accurate.
Yeah.
Except he's so random that it's hard to know.
That's just that point. It's like I could get all kinds of, if I could ask it about something and then be like, are you sure? And then it just change its mind and be like, okay. Like what else can I do? But like I also went to a conference just 2 weeks ago and I saw a whole session on this for survey work, where they were trying to generate fake personas to take their survey and to see if it would match how like that type of person, whatever.
Yeah.
And they were doing, I don't think anybody did this though. I think most people were just doing with prompting. Like just trying to give it a really lengthy prompt to ChatGPT that says, you are this person, you have this degree, or you're this age and this income.
Yeah.
Now act like that person. And like take this, like, and how well is that performed versus this where you're really changing the model structurally in some way? Like I wonder if I were just to give ChatGPT all of that conversation data and just say, here's everything, this is who you are, act like that person now, would it give me significantly different results?
So if you want to see, I mean, I can.
That's one of the main exploits, breaking guardrails on it.
Yeah, so I brought that up because I felt like that must be like one of the big benefits, is that if you needed to break the guardrail for some reason, then obviously here you're changing the model and you can make it do whatever you want. And you could, but there's times where you need to. And that was also my critique of that session when they were doing this. I was like, yeah, but you're asking a sane model. Like, I mean, ChatGPT has guardrails, so it has to be rational or whatever. And I'm like, but people are not rational. If you wanted people to actually respond to my survey like the way a person would, you're gonna get all kinds of random rants and stuff. You're gonna get people who just get mad at me for no reason. You need to have some like really angry bots and some like really nice bots and bots that just don't care about anything, and bots that are disillusioned with the world. And like, you gotta have all of that in there. Otherwise, you're just gonna get back like everything's great, and you're learning nothing. And so I don't know. It's like the desire to mimic human behavior. ChatGPT was the last place I would go. It's like super happy, nice person all the time. Like no one's like that.
Yeah. Well, and that's why if you get your own
It's like Reddit is-
models, they don't have all that extra training on top. So here are models that I have currently in my Olama. So I have the original 2 base models, and then I have these that I built last summer when I was first learning to do this. So if I take one of those and I do run and I paste. So now it's loading up one of those models. And now it's a chatbot, basically. So this model, I did this on askconservatives.reddit to see like, what are conservative perspectives on different topics? So like, how do you feel about nuclear energy? So yeah, so as someone who believes in responsible governments and environmental stewardship, I think the essential weight of the benefits against the risk. Now, that's not if I ask the same question to the general Llama model, it would give me a very different response. So now this model acts like conservative people on Reddit, how they answered those questions. Now, are they really conservative people or are they bots? Who knows what's on Reddit? But it does answer substantially different. Now, I guess I could put all those Reddits and do a RAG of it and see how that works.
Yeah.
But again, a RAG just works different. It's putting it into context memory, and it's only putting little snippets of it based on your chunk size. So, oh yeah, that's true. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll catch up here next week and we'll finish off the process.
Are you gonna talk next week about
This is-
how to evaluate success, or is it just